Welcome back to the Haunted Beard, and today I'm going to be talking about the controversial film The Devils from 1971, directed by Ken Russell. And this is a movie that has been, I guess, on my radar for a little while, and you'll usually be able to find it on some of the most, controversial films ever made list. And it is not technically a horror movie, but in a lot of ways it kind of is. And so um, I just reactivated my Shutter account, seen that it was on there. I was like, oh, I got to give that a watch. So I want to talk about it. I just finished watching it like 20 minutes ago, so my thoughts are kind of raw and fresh. But yeah, let's talk about it. So this is quite an experience. There's uh, there's a lot to be said about it. So to give you a quick little breakdown of the plot, it takes place in France during the 17th century. The plague is kind of sweeping through the country, and it tells the story of this priest who is falsely accused of witchcraft by this sexually repressed nun, and it really has a lot to do with just religious hypocrisy and corruption and sort of the tension and the clash between the church and the state and things like that. And so that is the general story. The two main leads are Oliver Reed plays the priest, and Vanessa Redgrave plays the nun. And it's always interesting going back and visiting like older movies like this, understanding sort of what the reputation is, but then now visiting them so many years later, it's like, how well is it going to hold up? Is this movie still controversial, or what are how does a modern day viewer, I guess, view a movie that's now 50 years old? So let's just start talking about it. The first thing I want to talk about is just really, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how to say this, but the movie has just such a powerful visual aesthetic to it. Um, it reminded me in some ways, and it's hard to get into the specifics, but it reminded me in some ways of other films of the '70s that were, I guess, boundary pushing to a degree, maybe controversial to a degree, like A Clockwork Orange and Taxi Driver. And although this film is very different, just in terms of uh, just the story and what it's about, there is just sort of this quality to it that kind of reminded me of those films. And it's hard to exactly pinpoint, but there's just this kind of impact to the imagery and just the images and the visuals that are captured on the film that just really hold like a weight to them. There is just, I feel like there's just really like an artistic quality to it, and it's just this. It's hard to exactly say or even really know specifically what it is, but it just reminded me of those movies in a way, just in terms of uh, there's like a frenzy in this movie. I don't know. It's hard to exactly sort of quantify that exactly, but there is something in this film, and just in terms of its visual presentation, its production design, and just the way some um, sequences are edited together, and just um, it just really has this kind of powerful visual impact. The images really kind of are, they kind of sear themselves into your brain in the same way some of those other films that I mentioned a minute ago do. Um, the production design is really really great and noticeable. Uh, just the sets that they built, it's really interesting. A lot of the sets and just a lot of the colors that are used are just a very simple black and white. A lot of the sets inside um, of the church and where the nuns live is white tiling with black grout, and so you just get this very sort of clean, crisp black and white contrast throughout a lot of the film. A lot of the costuming is very black and white, and obviously, I'm sure that was done intentionally. It just kind of, I don't know, gave me this sort of connection of there's a lot of just the theme, kind of some just um, themes of morality, and I don't know, just seeing things as the church did in the 17th century, uh, just in very black and white. You're either good or evil. You're either right or wrong. There's no middle ground. There's no gray area. So I don't know, just the colors and just the production with that black and white. I don't know, just kind of reminded me of that and made me sort of connect that idea. Um, so there's just a lot to be said about just the visuals and the production value. I think is great and holds up really well. Um, just the visual eye of the director is really great, and just visually, this film I think is really pretty powerful and memorable. The performances, at least from the two leads, are quite solid. I know sometimes going back into older films, sometimes the acting doesn't date too well, and acting styles change and evolve and things like that. But I think they still hold up quite well, especially Vanessa Redgrave. Her character is wild, and she has some pretty just unhinged scenes she has to act out, and it just does it very effectively. I thought her performance is really solid. Um, and so it's a movie that just has some interesting themes just about corruption and just how you know um, obviously there is some actual, this is actually kind of loosely based on actual events, which is pretty interesting, but just corruption within the Catholic Church, and just um, all for power, and just the hypocrisy and things like that are just kind of interesting sort of discussion points and things like that. And so um, yeah, overall, it's quite an experience, and I'm glad I watched it. I would recommend it for people who are interested in, it is a different, like I said, it's not technically a horror film. It is but I think in a way it is pretty horrific, at least what happens. And so I would recommend it. I think it's worth watching, especially if you like horror movies, you're interested in the history of film and what made things controversial and things like that. And so, I mean, the overall grade I don't think really matters as much. I don't know. I'd probably give it somewhere around like a 7 out of 10 or something like that. But I'm glad I watched it. It's really interesting. I'll be thinking about it for a little while. And so yeah, that's The Devils. Those are kind of my initial thoughts. So that is that. Coming up next, I think what I want to do is I want to finally uh, I'm going to review, I think, the entire Halloween franchise. And I have only seen the first film. I think there's technically like 12 or 13 movies now in the entire franchise, if you count all the sort of the reboots and things like that. But I've only actually ever seen the very first original 1978 Halloween. So I think I'm going to watch those and give them a review. So be on the lookout for that coming up next. And we will see you next time on The Haunted Beard.